So today I wanted to talk about beach settings because I've been doing a few live videos lately, and one of the most common questions I get is what kind of settings are you using on the beach. So I wanted to see if I could possibly address that and show you guys what settings I use. Now, before I show you these settings, I want to make it clear that these settings work on my beach. It's not to say that it's going to work on your beach. Your beach may be different. It may be more mineralized. It may have more salt. It can be a variety of things. So again, if you are going to use these settings, you may have to find that you have to adjust some of the settings that will work best for your beach. So I don't want to say this is the end all to be all of settings, but these are the settings that I use that work on my beach. So I want to go through these and I want to show you how I set these up, and hopefully if you're familiar with the XP Deus, this is going to seem pretty easy. That I am using the beach program, and I also use the beach sensitive program. So I'm going to walk you through both of those programs and sort of show you how I address them, set them up for the beach. So let's start with looking at the beach program. So the beach program, I've got it here in front of you guys. You see I've got it set on beach. You would go to your menu setting, which is that center button right below menu. You would mash that and that brings up the menu screen. You'll see the first setting there is discrimination. What I have found is that I need to adjust that discrimination setting to about 6.8. So I'll usually lower it down a little bit. And again, the higher your discrimination is going to be, the more depth that you're going to lose. So actually bumping it down might be a good thing. It tends not to go off on the bottle caps quite so much at 6.8. So anyway, that's what I run it to. So 6.8 is what I run the discrim at on the beach program. So the next one is the sensitivity. Now this is site dependent. You'll adjust the sensitivity depending on how much you want to run this machine hot. So if you can deal with a lot of chatter, you might want to leave it at 95, but I tend to bump mine down just a little bit. I do have some EMI on my beach, so I will run the sensitivity down usually around 93. And I'm just hitting the minus button to lower the sensitivity down. The next one is the salt sensitivity. The higher you run the salt sensitivity, then the more sensitive it's going to be to the salt mineralization. So if you start to bump it down, hitting the minus button, then what you're going to find is you are adding a little bit of filter to the salt sensitivity setting. So you're making it where the mineralization doesn't come in quite so much. I usually run mine on about 7. So 7 is what I found works. If you want to lower yours down even more because your beach has more mineralization, then you can do that. But I usually run mine around 7. Let's go to the next setting, which is your frequency shift, and make sure you always do that just like you would do with any other machine, so you can knock out some EMI and other interference that might be in the area. And of course, hopefully you know how to do the frequency shift. The iron volume really dependent on you. If your beach really doesn't have a lot of iron, you don't want to hear the iron, you could run it all the way down to 0. I like to hear a little bit of iron, so I usually run mine right around 2, so at least I know it's a piece of iron laying there. So the iron volume I usually run around 2. Totally up to you, that's a preference call, but 2 tends to be enough for me. If you want to run it to 1, you'll still hear a little bit of iron, but 2 seems to work really good for me. Reactivity. Now the default setting is 0, and at 0 you're really getting the maximum depth, but remember you got to have a little slower swing speed. If you're going to use that 0 reactivity, you're really going to have to swing slow. I tend to be trying to cover a lot of ground. I'm swinging pretty fast. This machine can really handle that, and I have some EMI on my beach. By bumping it up to 1 or either 1.5, it tends to knock out the EMI on my beach, and the reactivity works really well, and I still get really good depth even at 1.5. So I don't usually run it any higher than 1.5, but if you really want to go with those deeper targets, then you can bump that reactivity down to 1 or either 0.5. If you're really slow with your swing speed and you have enough discipline to do it, then you could even bump it down to 0. That's, again, a total personal preference, but you can decide whether running that reactivity low works for you, or you can run it up, I'd say, to about 1.5. And again, a personal preference, but the reactivity at 1.5 and 1 tends to work pretty good for me, and that's what I've been running on my beach. So you might want to try that. If you have a lot of EMI, you definitely want to bump the reactivity up to try to knock out some of that EMI interference. Audio response is at 5. That helps you get a lot of the deeper targets set at 5. You could even go up to 6, 7. It's the highest you can go. I tend to leave it on 5. Sometimes I might go down to 4. But if you want to hear those real faint, deep signals, you're really working an area, then you can definitely bump it up to 5. I usually run on 4 or 5. Just depends, again, on what I'm actually trying to accomplish. But 4 or 5 tends to work really well for me on my beach. And again, that's it for the beach setting on the beach program. Now, I actually do the same thing with beach sensitive. Now, if you're using beach sensitive, it's going to run a little more hot. Here we are at beach sensitive. Again, the menus, basically the same thing. You hit your middle menu button. The scrim is set at 8. I bump it down to 6.8 because, again, that's what I found works really well, especially with the bottle caps. We'll look at bottle cap reject in just a second. Sensitivity is at 95. If you can leave it at 95 and it's not just driving you crazy, then I would suggest leaving it at 95 if you're really going for the deeper targets. Salt sensitivity, again, I think 7 works really, really well. This one's set at 7. Frequency shift, of course, you do that. Iron volume, again, I bump mine down to 2. If you really don't want to hear any iron, then you could bump it down to 0. Just depends. That's a personal preference as well. Reactivity, again, at 0. I would, if I was in the beach sensitive program and I was using it on the reactivity, I might run it at 0.5 or 1, especially if you want to go deep and hit deep targets. Beach sensitive with the reactivity set at 0.5 or 1. If that works on your beach, it may not. If you have a lot of EMI, you might have to bump that reactivity even up to 1.5. But if you can run it at 0.5 or 1, you really can hit some of those really deeper targets. Audio response, again, I leave it 5, just because you're trying to go deep with beach sensitive. Will make those real faint signals sound really good. You can hear them, and hopefully you can dig them, and it's going to be a big, huge gold ring. So audio response of 5 is really good. And that's it for the beach sensitive program. A couple of other things that I tend to monkey around with, and I'll show you guys that. If you go to discrimination, so go back to your menu, hit expert. Expert's right here underneath where it says expert. You hit that button and you look at the tones. Now, I run in 3 tones a lot of times, but I also like, instead of 3 tones, I like to run in pitch. And the reason why I do that is because running in pitch reminds me of relic hunting, and so I'm really used to those sounds. And so running it in pitch, I tend to like a lot. So you might want to check that out. See if that works for you. It may not. You may not like pitch. You may like the 3 tones better. But pitch is one thing I like. So I will sometimes run mine in pitch just for that different sound because it's something I'm really familiar with. So what I've found with bottle caps is if you leave it on 0, if you can do it and you're not digging a lot of bottle caps and you sort of figured out what some of the sounds and audio are with bottle caps, then that's great. But if you need to add a little bit of bottle cap reject, then what I've found is the best ideal number on the beach is going to be 3. So you would go over here to the plus button, of course, bump it up to 3. 3 tends to work. 2, you're still going to run the risk of hitting a bottle cap. If you pull that coil over close to the edge, sometimes you can hear the iron. Some of the newer bottle caps, if they haven't been out in the ocean or in the sand for a while, they're not going to have a lot of rust on them, so they'll sound off a little better. But if you run it at 3 tends to really knock those bottle caps out. If you're not having a hard time with bottle caps, then you can leave this on 0. The more filters you add, of course, you're taking away something from the machine, whether it be depth, whether it be unmasking. It could be a variety of things. So again, use that bottle cap feature sort of sparingly, but if bottle caps are an issue for you, the best number for me on my beach has been 3. So just to give you guys a heads up on that. So one other thing I wanted to mention about both the beach program and the beach sensitive program is that both of these programs run in higher frequencies. The regular beach program runs in, I believe, 24 kilohertz, and the beach sensitive runs in 40 kilohertz. And so both of those are going to be really susceptible to really small targets. And again, it can help you find little small pieces of gold and thin gold chains as well that maybe some other machines miss. So running it in those higher frequencies could help, and it may get frustrating, especially if you have a lot of little brass snaps. But again, both of those programs run at the higher frequencies. Beach runs at 24, beach sensitive runs at 40. So be aware of that.